Hey, this is Scott L. Miller, and today on Sam IT, I'm going to answer the question that comes up all the time, which is, if you tell me that I don't need a SAN, how come everybody I talk to tells me I need a SAN? This one's pretty interesting, and I've been looking at this problem for a decade almost, and it's a really good one to discuss. Obviously, we have two conflicting schools of thought. If you go to your average vendor or your average peer in IT, or just a business person, and ask them, do you need a SAN? They're going to say, of course you do. You have to have a SAN. But if you go to people who are storage engineers and ask them if you need a SAN, or someone who is a platform architect and ask them if you need a SAN, most of the time, always, they will ask you what your needs are and figure out what you do need. And almost always the answer is going to be no. A SAN doesn't even meet your needs, let alone be the right thing. So how can these two things come together? Why is everybody trying to get us to get a SAN except for a small number of people in the architecture or storage space who are trying to get us to do whatever's appropriate for our specific environment? Why is there conflicting schools of thought here? Well, the foundation here is with vendors. The first thing you have to understand is that SANs are one of the, if not the, highest markup item in hardware today. The overall sales of hardware and equipment for IT has kind of dried up. The margins are low. Lots get sold, but people buy them through places where there's really no sales interaction. You can just go on Amazon and buy almost anything you need, or you can just go to a vendor directly and order it and not have any human interaction. This allows the prices to go down, margins to be low, but it means that salespeople have a tough time making their money to take home and feed their families. To do this, they need to sell something with big margins, an expensive item with lots of markup. And the one thing that still has that universally is a SAN. Now, this is going to change. SANs are starting to get cheaper, and those margins are starting to go away. So eventually this will stop. But for the foreseeable future, and for the very seen past, this is how the industry works. A SAN that might cost $10,000 to make might be sold for $50,000. The markup is insane. And you have to remember, because a lot of people forget, these aren't magic black boxes. They're just servers running a special piece of software that hands out block storage. Yeah, they might have a little bit of special hardware, but it's nothing really special. It's just maybe a little bit higher quality, maybe a little bit redundant, maybe fewer components than the server they're based on. But it's still a server. There's no magic, right? IT is not a field where magic exists. So when you're dealing with a SAN, you're just buying a server with a ton of markup. Partially, this is for support reasons. And one of the things that might make a good SAN better than a normal server, it might have really good support. But you're going to pay for that. You can buy a normal server with really good support too if you wanted. The other thing is that SANs are complex. Actually, they're simple. SANs are so simple that they become complex for most people. It's that they think SANs do a whole bunch of things that they don't, and it makes them confusing, and so they need support. So not only is the markup on a SAN huge, but they tend to sell either at the time of purchase a large support package for it, or MSPs and other resellers who are pushing the SANs get to sell a whole bunch of their own support along with the package, whether it's installation or ongoing support or whatever, maintenance. These things add up to huge numbers. And so everybody you talk to wants to sell you a SAN. In fact, the margins are so large, and this is a rough number, but it's pretty accurate. If you were to have a salesperson and he had 10 sales prospects, and his choices were to actually look into their needs and try to sell them something that was sensible for them, or to push SANs that were not needed, if he was to lose 9 out of 10 customers because they figured out that he was trying to oversell them, but 1 of the 10 bought the SAN anyway, it would be well worth it for him to lose 90% of his in-the-pipe guaranteed customers over pushing the SAN, because the one who buys it is worth so much money that he doesn't care he lost the other 9. That's how dramatic this is. Basically, if you're not buying a SAN, your salesperson doesn't care about you. You don't make them enough money to matter. They won't throw away your business in most cases, but they're always going to push the SAN because on the off chance that you fall for it on any given time, it is worth anything to them to make sure they make that margin. So that's why the vendors, and that's why hold on. That's why the vendors, and that's why your resellers will always push a SAN at any cost. It doesn't matter what their relationship is with you, their profits are so big they can't afford to do anything else. Now, that carries on to customers, because those vendors and those resellers universally all push the same thing. Customers get a unified message from everyone they talk to. You have to have a SAN. As long as you're going to a vendor or someone who's funded by selling a product, they have an effectively unlimited influence by the value of that sale, that they can never expose the fact that you didn't need one. And if you're a customer who didn't need one and figured it out, they really can't risk admitting that, because that might get explained somewhere or recorded, that might get shown to other customers. Risks they don't want to take. So you get, as customers, you hear from every angle that you need a SAN, and no one is going to tell you otherwise until you hire a storage engineer who isn't paid to sell you something. And even then, sometimes they're going to make mistakes. They're influenced by the same thing. So that's the foundation, but we can take it farther. Because this happens to everyone, chances are everyone you know who works and needs to consider if they're going to get a SAN or not has been pressured in the same way, and they probably bought a SAN. Now, they have an influence that they don't only want to support the things that they've done. Their job might be on the line if they were to expose that they just listened to a salesperson and bought what they were told, rather than researching what was actually needed, or just generally saying that they made a bad decision. Nobody wants to admit that they made a bad decision in the past with what they did. So because most people have purchased a SAN, most people will then tell you that it was a good idea. They may not go so far as to tell you you need one, but they'll tell you that they should have had one. In fact, I see this all the time. I talk to people who have SANs regularly, and they say it was a great purchase, and I run through the numbers with them and show how it wasn't a good purchase. They increased their risk, they increased their cost, they increased complexity over other options, and they could have been in a better position today with more money in their pockets and less risk had they not done it. But they will, in many cases, still go on and proclaim that the SAN was a success, even when they know that the numbers have shown that it wasn't, that doing a post-mortem resulted in a bad decision being the result. Not all cases, of course, SANs are needed someplace. I'm not saying everyone. I'm saying that this is a regular thing, that the degree to which people are influenced by the fact that they don't want to admit that they made a bad decision in the past, whether it's just because they don't want to lose face, or possibly because they know that their managers and owners are paying attention to things that they say and they don't want it to get back to them, that they figured out that possibly tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars were wasted for no reason, or even to the company's deficit. These are things that people don't want to repeat. It's human nature. And if you want a good book on this, and I will mention this one so many times in the series, it's Predictably Irrational. It's a wonderful book. You can go get it on Amazon. That talks about why people are influenced in these ways and how we respond when we've made a bad decision, but we convince ourselves that we didn't, and how we present it to other people and why we do it. Read that book, one of the best things you will ever read. But so these factors come together so that if you're going out and looking to get a SAN, if you don't do your own research, if you don't push for answers, if you don't go find people who aren't under these specific influences, you're basically guaranteeing that every single person you talk to will have a strong incentive, whether it's a financial one, a legal one, or a emotional one. They will all feel compelled to pressure you to buy a SAN, whether to make them money or to make their own decisions look that much more valid. It doesn't matter, they're all influenced in the same way. So because of this universal influence, it creates a snowball effect where everyone feels more and more pressure over time, because we keep seeing that everyone else is making the same decision. And if everyone else is doing it, it must be the right decision, right? Which of course is always bad logic. Nothing that everyone does should ever tell us that we need to do that too. Most people make bad decisions. People are inherently irrational. They're bad at making decisions. It's a human trait. It's just how we are. Making good decisions is one of the things that we have to practice and learn and develop as people who work in IT. Of course, that goes for all humans. Everyone does better when they make good decisions, but IT especially is a field where good decision making is the difference between being great IT and negative IT. Your value comes from your decision making and almost nothing else. And so that's something that we have to cultivate in ways that most other fields don't to the same extreme degree that we do. We simply can't script our jobs. What we do is decision make all the time. So we should, one, know that we never look at what the masses do to determine if something is a good idea. It might tell us that it's something worth considering because lots of people have considered it, maybe. But never should we use, well, everyone else does it, how could it be a bad idea? Once we've said that, we've essentially admitted that we knew it was a bad idea and did it anyway, or that we simply didn't look into it and did something with no reason. Two, we should never go to salespeople who are paid to give us something on their margins to pay for their family and have no interest or minimal interest in our needs. Of course, this goes without saying. Everyone should know never to get advice from a salesperson. That's just basic adulting. And yet, it's a very big temptation, especially in IT, because they're free advice, whereas consultants you have to pay. But of course, consultants work for us. Salespeople work against us. There's a reason that they're free. The thing that they're being paid to sell to us, not to represent us. In every case, no exceptions. Don't ever try to pretend that there is an exception to that rule. There is not. You may find someone who is able to do what's right for you and do what's right for the person they represent or the company that they represent. It's few and far between, and you won't know when it's happening because you can't guarantee, because it only works when you created a situation where the right thing just happened to be what they were selling. And if you were doing that, you didn't need the salesperson anyway. You could have just bought that thing. And three, don't look at the pressure created by peers as a way to determine what you should do, right? They simply don't have the rational thought in enough cases to be able to tell you whether their decisions were good. Their own evaluation of their own things are not generally going to be honest, not intentionally dishonest. They're not being honest with themselves in most cases, so you have to understand that just because someone lied to themselves and thinks something was a good idea, if you don't run the math and do the understanding and look at the architecture or whatever, you may be being misled by the same thing that is leading them to mislead themselves. So this is a tough one, but it's really interesting, right? SANs are pushed everywhere, and yet they're almost never the right answer. How do we make that make sense? It's a complicated question, and it points fingers at a lot of people. And it's important to understand that of these actors, the salespeople are acting ethically. It is not their job to give you the recommendation for what you need. It is their job to sell the SAN. When you engage a salesperson, by the nature of engaging a salesperson, you have committed to, that's their ethical requirement, is to sell the thing that their vendor tells them to sell, their boss tells them to sell. They have a requirement to do that, both a social one and probably a legal one. If you expect them to do something else, that is something that you should, it's not appropriate for you to expect them to act differently than that. Not only is it their own self-interest, it is their ethical interest to act that way. So expecting them to act unethically in your interest, which is not aligned with their interest, is kind of insane. So never expect that. Two, yes, your peers may tell you really bad advice, but chances are they're acting irrationally without knowing it. They're either defending themselves and are having a fight or flight response, or they're simply doing a reverse rationalization where they try to apply rationale to an inherently irrational decision in the first place. In most cases, they listen to a salesperson. They never knew what the rationale was for purchasing the SAN, and now that they have one, in their minds, we create, all humans that do this, we create reverse rationale to try to remember why we made a decision in a rational way, even if it didn't happen. Humans work this way. Again, read the book. Good stuff. So it's not that this is a chance to point fingers and be like, these people are trying to hurt me. That's not the case. Normally, I mean, somebody must be trying to hurt you. But in almost all cases, this is people either acting ethically or out of self-preservation or simply normal human irrational and reverse rationalization behaviors that we should expect when we're going to look at these kinds of references. So thanks for joining me. I hope this is helpful. I know this one is going to generate a lot of questions and a lot of comments and probably a lot of trolling. And it can't be helped because there simply are the majority of people in the industry have something to lose by it being exposed that SANs may not be the best idea. And I want to reiterate, just because SANs are normally not the right way to approach storage doesn't mean that they're always wrong. The majority of the Fortune 1000 should have SANs, if for at least something. Now this is starting to go away, but that's going to change in the future, not in the past. And also, just because something is wrong today doesn't mean it was wrong 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So don't take you shouldn't do this today as you shouldn't have done this 10 years ago. I don't know what your situation was 10 years ago. I don't know what your needs were. You need to, if you want to do a post-mortem, great, do a post-mortem. If you want to talk about that, post it in the community. Let's do a post-mortem of 10 years ago and see what might have made sense. But don't take today's decision as a commentary on past decisions. And so it's not about it's not about finding people who are at fault, because it's just not what it is. But we need to be sensitive to the fact that a lot of people are very reactionary simply because everyone has something on the line. And if you look, anyone who responds negatively, you can pretty much guarantee that they have a SAN and they feel that they have to defend it. And that's the thing that's really tough, right? And we see this with lots of different things, and it's worth discussing in a psychology classroom, but people are defensive about decisions that they've made universally, and if they feel that they're being attacked or being questioned, they will lash out. So you can expect that. That's a sign that it's a good question to ask. Should they have had those SANs? If they give good rational math and explain why the SAN does something that other things don't or whatever, great. If they're upset that people think you should evaluate a SAN to see if it makes sense for you, if you're questioning evaluating for your needs, I think you have your answer. Anyway, remember to like and subscribe. Please comment below, even if you're a troll. No, please, not if you're a troll. Whatever. And if you want to sponsor us, you can do so on Patreon.